the hour of 6:30. Having come and gone 5 minutes ago, I will call to order the Common Council meeting of Tuesday, January 13th, 2026, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. President Vidver. Here. President Vidver is present. Alder Duncan. Here. Alder Duncan is present. Alder Evers. Here. Alder Evers is present. Alder Field. Here. Alder Field is present. Alder Figueroa Cole. Here. Alder Figueroa Cole is present. Alder Glenn.
Here.
Alder Glenn is present. Alder Govindarajan. Here. Alder Govindarajan is present. Alder Ugair. Here. Alder Ugair is present. Alder Harrington McKinney. Excellent. Alder Lankella. Here. Alder Lankella is present. Alder Knox is excused. Alder Madison. Here. Madison is present. Alder Martinez Rutherford. Present. Alder Martinez Rutherford is present. Alder Matthews. Here. Alder Matthews is present. Alder Mayer. Here. Alder Mayer is present. Alder O'Brien. Here. Alder O'Brien is present. Alder Ohovich. Present. Alder Ohovich is present. Alder Pritchett. Here. Alder Pritchett is present. Alder Tischler is excused. Alder Revere. Here. Alder Revere is present. Madam Mayor, we have quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying Happy New Year to all of you. Hope that it's a good one. Off to a banner start, so things can only go up from here. And I will give our usual reminder that we're here to do the business of the people of Madison and ask that we do that with grace and kindness, and that all concerned refrain from using any profanities in your remarks, please. I'll also remind you that everybody has time limits on how long they can speak, and you don't need to use all your time. So with that said, we will go right into disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, then we will move into the presentation of the consent agenda. President Vitiver.
The consent agenda is moved with the recommended action listed for each item on the agenda, except items that have registrants wishing to speak and items that alders have separated out for discussion or debate purposes. This document lists supermajority items, agenda items with recommendations different from the agenda, items for exclusion, items introduced from the floor, and agenda items with corrections. The following agenda items are supermajority items. Item 59, Legislative File 91094, designated City of Madison polling locations for the 2026 spring primary, 14 votes required to adopt under suspension of MGO 2.055. Item 60, Legislative File 91352, establishing in-person absentee voting locations for the 2026 spring primary and election, 14 votes required to adopt under suspension of the same MGO. Item 62, Legislative File 91138, reapproving a certified survey map of property owned by E&K Land LLC located at 1412 Flom Road in District 15, 14 votes required to adopt under suspension of the same MGO. The following agenda items have recommendations different from the agenda. Item 17, Legislative File 91135, creating Section 28.140 to establish a temporary moratorium on the consideration and/or issuance of zoning certificates for data centers and telecommunications centers, and amending 28.061, 28.082, and 28.151 to accommodate the temporary moratorium, is also has speakers registered, and so will be excluded from the consent agenda. Item 61, Legislative File 91103, amending Section 33.32 of the Madison General Ordinances related to the Joint Campus Area Committee to modify the composition and duties of the JCAC. Common Council Executive Committee recommends to adopt. Item 79 has a substitute, authorizing the Department of Transportation to apply for a $6.75 million National Railroad Partnership Program, federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail grant from the Federal Railroad Administration, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sign the resulting grant agreement to accept the grant. Item 136, Legislative File 91552, documenting policies for food production on city-owned land. We're changing the date for the Madison Food Policy Commission from 1/21 to 2/18. The following items are excluded either because of request of alders or speakers registered. Item 13, Star 90908, amending sections within Chapter 28 of Madison General Ordinances to allow reduced rear setback if adjacent to public publicly owned multi-use path. There are speakers registered. Item 17, which we already discussed, 91135 on the moratorium on data centers. Item 64, which is Legislature 91026, authorizing the Madison Police Department to accept grants for training on an ongoing basis. There are speakers registered. Item 73, Legislative File 90986, assessing costs associated with mutual aid responses provided by MPD for the purposes of recouping extraordinary expenses, and there are speakers registered. Items introduced from the floor, Legislative File 91530, opposing the expansion of the Beltline within the city of Madison and supporting improved multimodal and local connectivity across and along the corridor. This will go to Transportation Commission on 121 and Common Council on 127.
Right. Are there any other items that alders would like to have excluded from the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, let me just run through that quickly to make sure that everybody has everything. The following items require 14 votes and will be recorded as unanimous. Items 59, 60, and 62. And item 61, the recommendation is to adopt. On item 79, the recommendation is to adopt the substitute. On item 136, we will be changing the referral date of the Food Policy Council to 2/18. And then excluded from the consent agenda are items 13, 17, 64, and 73. We have one introduction from the floor and no corrections. All good? All good. So then on the consent agenda, President Vetiver.
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda, and that will take us to public comment. Our first item with registrants wishing to speak is item 13. This is amending sections within Chapter 28 of the Madison General Ordinances to allow reduced rear setback if adjacent to publicly owned multi-use path. We have one registrant wishing to speak, Linda Leonards of South Patterson. Do we have Linda?
Hello. Obviously, I'm against this proposed change, or I wouldn't be speaking. The change does not add greater consistency. There is a 5-block stretch of Williamson where there is a planned development and other buildings facing a side street where the building is about 5 feet from the lot line. But this is an unusual area in that it is where the railroads ran to the station at Blair, and this area housed a number of uses, such as farm implement stores, that needed to be close to the railroad. It was developed to other subsequent uses as a relatively late date compared to other neighborhood areas. Outside of that 5-block stretch, that has been pretty much been redeveloped in recent years. There is only one building with a side lot line of 7 feet abutting the Cap City Trail at Division Street. This change will give an opportunity for expansion of buildings close to the bike path, but only in limited spots, thus creating greater inconsistency. And it's not clear where this inconsistency will necessarily occur. The proposal allows for a 5-foot rear yard along a publicly owned multi-use path. However, the term publicly owned multi-use path is undefined. There is one site that will benefit from the change. The proposed Hovde development on Helena had sought neighborhood support for PD status last July to decrease its required backyard. The basis for this PD was, in my opinion, weak. And then just yesterday, perhaps anticipating council approval, a notice was issued that Hovde intends to apply for a demo permit about February 2nd. Nor is this proposal likely to create activation of the path. The path is already active, and the majority of the recent buildings that have been 5 feet from the path have parking on the ground floor. So there really isn't any activation for the path from those buildings.
About 40 seconds left.
Thank you. And I urge you to please think about the trees. Many trees are near the lot lines. The developer at 306 Brearley removed trees after assuring Plan Commission that none would be removed, and that might be taken care of by the new ordinance. Trees that remained had their roots hacked because the hole for the building was dug out to the lot line. Those still live, but whether they will live for long after having a substantial part of their roots hacked off is questionable. In addition, the trees close to these new buildings get limbs hacked off so they don't interfere with the construction. And finally, there is no place for tenants to use any land
That's
for
your time.
personal reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for the registrant on item 13? Seeing none, thank you. Our next item that we have registrants wishing to speak on is item 17, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to establish a temporary moratorium on the consideration and/or issuance of zoning certificates for data centers and telecommunication centers, and amending sections of the Madison General Ordinances to accommodate this temporary moratorium. On item 17, our first registrant wishing to speak is Jaden Trock of District 5, to be followed by David Aguayo, to be followed by Brett Halsey. Jaden?
Where would you like me?
Either side with a microphone.
It's a bit short.
As long as the name's in your mouth, you're fine.
What's that?
Yeah, it's directional. As long as
Oh,
the name's in
gotcha.
your mouth, you're good.
Hey, cool. All right. Hi, I'm Jaden Troke. I'm from District 5 under President Alder Vitever. So I'm a power engineer. I work in Madison on the grid. I'm a substation engineer, and I heard that data centers were being talked about tonight, and I feel like I have some insights to share, mostly around power usage and how it's going to be affecting the people of Wisconsin. So a lot of people talk about water. I think the bigger thing to question here is the upgrades that need to happen to the grid in order to get the power where it needs to go. And that is reflected on the taxpayer. That's reflected on me. That's reflected on you. It's reflected on everyone in the room through something called an electricity distribution cost. So if you look at your electric bill from MG&E or Alliant, it's going to have several different numbers on there. One is going to be your utilization, your usage, your kilowatt per hour. And the other is going to be your electricity, whatever I just said. The other number refers to a taxation that happens when we upgrade the grid. So that has to do with any projects that happen with the utility where we're going in and we're replacing breakers or we're creating whole new substations in order for the demand to be met for this new utilization. And that is a tax that gets reflected on the American people. You can kind of thinking about it like we drive on roads, everyone uses electricity, it makes sense that we pay for it. The problem is the actual American people are not getting anything out of these data centers. It's massive corporations like Meta, it's Google, it's X, whatever, who are making billions of dollars off of this, off of the taxpayers' money, either by using subsidies federally or state level, and getting the American people to pay for upgrades that need to happen to the grid. So in Virginia I bring up because it has the most number of data centers in it in the US per state right now, is expected, according to this report from North Carolina University and Magellan University, to have an increase in their cost to their electric bill of about 25% by 2030, which is huge. That's massive. The average bill right now right there is $150. That's about $500 extra for every single electric bill paying citizen in Virginia.
You have about
In
a minute
Wisconsin,
left.
Am I out of time?
About a minute.
Okay. In Wisconsin, it's not that bad. I think average, it's about 8% an increase because data centers are happening everywhere. It's going to be an increase for every person. The way that you can defend against it is by including something like this moratorium where we can allow legislature to catch up with technology, where you can put in law that says these companies have to pay their fair share to actually upgrade the grid and utilize the power that they're using to make tons of money without affecting the taxpayer. Thank you very much. I have so much more to say. If you have questions, I'll be over there. But thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is David Aguayo of District 4, representing the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce. David?
Good evening, Madam Mayor Rhodes Conway and members of the Madison Common Council. On behalf of the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, I'm here to express our strong opposition against file number 91135 that would establish a moratorium on zoning certificates for data and telecommunication centers. To quote Governor Tony Evers on data centers, I think if we keep open minds, we can keep the environmental piece in a good place. But equally important is the fact that we have to have jobs for the future. Moratoriums by nature are blunt instruments that shut the door on any investment opportunity. Our existing process and this body are designed to carefully consider the benefits and challenges that need to be gathered to find solutions, recognizing that when done well, development projects have economic benefit for our community, including job creation and tax-based growth. With multi-million-dollar budget deficits, constant referenda that increase taxes, and council projects that rely on an increased tax base for funding, help us understand how a year of missed investment opportunities is a responsible path forward. It's frustrating to see a local government stall on the very technology that drives our regional economy. The contrast between Madison's tech growth and its legislative hesitation is a sharp one. The region boasts the highest concentration of software jobs in the nation and ranks 11th in overall tech employment. We are one of the few metros growing our national share of these roles, yet with this, we cannot even consider proposals for the technology that serves as the backbone of our economy and the internet. We are not advocating for any data center to be approved without questions. On the contrary, we are advocating for the process to remain open. That every development project gets to state its case so that this body can make an informed decision. This proposal does not allow for that to happen. This is not just a land use question. Data centers, when they come, will have an economic impact. As such, I urge this council to refer this item to the Economic Development Committee to ensure that the city's economic expertise is considered on this proposal, specifically on the process and duration, as a year moratorium is an unreasonable amount of time to close the door on potential investment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Brett Halsey of District 12.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the ice report, we should be having ice sailing on Kaganza this weekend with the cold coming. We had her out on the Mary B last year, and that was a fantastic ride. Thanks for coming. So this is the best ice boating venue in the world, by the way, so in case you're wondering. So, but we're not talking about ice today. They have the problem in Minneapolis. We're talking about Elon Musk taking over your house and your life, because that is what he wants to do, according to his own statements. I work out at Capitol Lakes. I'd encourage you, some of you, to enjoy some of the Fauci family stuff. And I was doing a TRX thing. I'm Brett Halsey, by the way, so I'm an energy consultant. I started my energy business after actually driving through Madison in Alaska, working for President Jimmy Carter in 1978. So it's not my first rodeo. So, but this gentleman's son was in charge of the State Department report that said that AI is one of the top threats to our safety. Not the environmental stuff is important to me, but how many of you saw The Terminator or have heard of The Terminator? You know, that does not end well. That is not where we want to head, but according to this report, that is where we are going. So, and who did Elon Musk lay off on his first days of Doge? That whole State Department team that was going to introduce that report. And I will email you the specifics of this later. Then, so this moratorium is important to give humans chances to catch up. We have numerous examples of chemicals. PFAS is a perfect example that was not thoroughly understood before it was released in the environment. The former cyber expert and the former prime minister of Israel says AI is like parachuting 1 million hackers into your country. and they operate fast. Right now, AI-operated drones are beating U.S. Air Force-operated drones in tests over the desert in the West. So this is very important. Thank you for leading the way. I know how thankful public service is. I spent 14 years. I started there, and then I started there, and then when I was chair of finance, I had to nap, so I moved to the back. So
About 30 seconds.
But thank you, Madam Chair. But I appreciate your work. This is important. 1 year may not be time. We can address the water stuff. We can address the other stuff. But we don't want Elon Musk controlling robots in our houses. And the robot he's got right now looks a lot like the Terminator. Have a good night, and thanks for your service.
Thank you. Are there questions for any of the registrants on item 17? Nope, only the council can ask questions. And I'm not seeing any, so we will move on then to item 13. Item 13. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Wishful thinking. We have registrants on wishing to speak on item 64, which is authorizing the Madison Police Department to accept grants for training on an ongoing basis. One registrant wishing to speak, Stephanie Rearick of District 6. Do we have Stephanie?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I also serve on the Police Civilian Oversight Board and chair the External Policy and Procedure Committee. And I'm speaking as myself from that perspective that I encourage you to vote no on this item, or if not, to amend it to add some contingencies. And I just think it's it's very stark. One of the things that I've noticed as a citizen and in the oversight board is the huge impact it makes, the nature and amount of trainings. And I very much support the police seeking training options and grants and scholarships, and think having the consistent oversight, just like with all the other city departments, having oversight from the council is really important. And we have an opportunity to really have a partnership where we institutionalize some improvements in policing in Madison. And I think weakening the currently existing oversight of policing isn't the direction to go. So I'm seeing that there are remedies for the situation so the officers can take advantage of the scholarship and be able to get things approved expeditiously at times if needed. I think that already is an option, and I would just really encourage you not to systemically weaken the oversight of the police department. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the registrant on item 64? Seeing none, then we'll move on to item 73. Item 73 is assessing costs associated with mutual aid responses provided by Madison Police Department for the purposes of recouping extraordinary expenses. On item 73, our first registrant wishing to speak is Kim Richmond of District 16, to be followed by Bonnie Rowe, to be followed by Patrick DePula. Do we have Kim?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'm speaking in opposition to this resolution. 10 years ago, two Madison residents launched the Good Neighbor Project. The project focuses on building relationships between neighbors and neighborhoods and bringing them together. I'm proud to be one of the administrators of one of the Good Neighbor projects. And speaking of good neighbors, in the past year, Monona PD has assisted Madison Police on over 200 occasions. I'm using Monona PD as an example since they seem to have raised the ire of 5 Olders who are co-sponsoring this resolution. Plus, I did some research. Assistance included everything from canine deployments and homicides to officers requesting emergency assistance, and significant calls such as the Abundant Life tragedy in which Monona PD was among the first on scene. At the request of Madison Police, Monona Police and other agencies provided coverage in Madison while MPD was tied up for most of the day and beyond after that tragedy. Monona PD, along with other agencies from around the state, also responded to requests for emergency assistance from MPD during the 2020 riots. To quote Monona Police Chief Brian Cheney in a WKOW article, quote, Monona PD spent hundreds of personnel hours and thousands of dollars in resources, and in that time, the Monona Police Department has never submitted a bill for reimbursement, unquote. It makes me wonder what the communities around us are now thinking, and imagine if they would request reimbursement from the city of Madison for their assistance. They haven't because they're good neighbors. You see, the Capital Area Police Mutual Aid Response System operates in all directions, and mutual aid embodies the essence of being a good neighbor. Calling out one department for having, in your opinion, quote, more aggressive policies which allow for far less restrictions and arguably encourage their officers to engage in pursuits, unquote, is presumptuous, unneighborly, irresponsible, and uncalled for. In a recent editorial in a Madison newspaper, Mr. Al Rickey wrote, quote, this proposal reeks of arrogance and demonstrates a disconnect with the realities of policing and the inherent dangers involved. Policing can be a dynamic endeavor with split-second decisions, and threats imposed by a few out-of-touch Madison City Council members illustrate their collective ignorance.
About 30
Moreover,
seconds.
The proposal ignores the potential chilling effect on Madison's future mutual aid needs in the event of a critical incident, such as a school shooting. Who will rush to help? Unquote. It's okay to have difference in policies and operations, but perhaps a city that doesn't allow body-worn cameras on police or school resource officers, and a few years ago tried to block funding for less than lethal options for the police department, should not be the ones who lecture others about modern policing practices.
That's your time. Thank you very much. Our next registrant is Bonnie Rowe of District 11, to be followed by Patrick DePula. Do we have Bonnie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the proposed resolution to recoup extraordinary expenses from our neighboring jurisdictions during mutual aid calls. Please consider the long-term structural damage this resolution could inflict on our regional safety. Mutual aid is built on a foundation of neighbor helping neighbor, a reciprocal system, not a transactional one. Since Monona was called out in the ordinance, I'll just echo what the last speaker said. They have helped us out a lot and never asked for a bill. By formalizing a policy to invoice them for pursuit-related costs, we are fundamentally changing our relationship with our neighbors. We risk cheapening the excellent, free will, generous response our neighboring agencies enjoy with one another. This resolution could introduce dangerous hesitations into split-second life and safety decisions. Our officers and supervisors may pause and wonder, could this become an extraordinary expense? Will the city attorney sue the neighbor if I get into a crash? In law enforcement, hesitation kills. We cannot ask our officers to perform a fiscal risk-benefit analysis while their colleagues are in the middle of a high-speed emergency. Mutual aid must remain automatic and unquestioned to ensure that no officer is ever left without backup. Finally, this resolution attempts to use financial penalties to force our neighbor to adopt Madison's pursuit values. While I agree that Madison's policy is likely safer and way more restrictive, Monona holds another important value. Madison prioritizes risk mitigation, while Monona prioritizes deterrence. Monona's leaders argue that if criminals know the police won't chase them, it creates a safe haven for crime and encourages even more reckless driving on our streets. I know that I and many fellow Madisonians are thankful for the work the MOPD does to keep our streets safer. We have different yet important
About a minute
values,
left.
and the city of Madison should not try to legislate the policies of another city through their checkbook. Another problem I have with this moving forward tonight is that when it was referred to the PSRC, they wanted the language tightened up and some key words, like extraordinary, defined. and the reworked resolution brought back before the PSRC before it came here for a vote. That was the clear intent of the committee. I hope one of you alders will move to re-refer this to the PSRC and that there will not be a vote tonight. This resolution may save a few dollars in the short term, but the cost to our regional trust, officer safety, and collaborative spirit will be far higher. If you do vote on this tonight, I ask you to vote no on this resolution and instead work out any bumps in regional policy alignment through partnership, not penalties. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last registrant wishing to speak on this item is Patrick DePula of Monona. Do we have Patrick? Doesn't look like we have.
There we go.
Oh, there you are. Yes, go ahead.
All right. Sorry. 1 second here, because I'm on a phone and I'm outside. So that's give me 1 second. And okay. So I am technical difficulties with a phone and outside. So, oops. Okay, apologies. So I'm here before you this evening as a City of Monona Alder, and I'm expressing my opposition to Resolution File 90986. While I appreciate the desire to address extraordinary costs associated with public safety responses, this resolution raises serious policy concerns and relies on a misleading characterization of external guidance that should be corrected before further consideration. The resolution asserts that Madison Police Department pursuit policy is in alignment with national standards presented by the Department of Justice and cites a link in support of that claim. However, the document linked contains an explicit disclaimer stating that it does not represent the views or opinions of the U.S. Department of Justice and that responsibility for the content rests with the authors. This publication does not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the U.S. Department of Justice. Responsibility for the information and views expressed herein lies entirely with the authors. This is excerpted from the document cited in Resolution 90986 as national standards. Characterizing this material as DOJ established national standards is inaccurate and materially misleading when used to justify legislative action or intergovernmental criticism. The distinction matters because Resolution 90986 goes beyond internal policy alignment and instead attempts to financially penalize neighboring municipalities, including Monona, through cost recovery tied to mutual aid responses, effectively using disputed policy interpretations as leverage over another jurisdiction's law enforcement practice. It is also important to acknowledge that mutual aid is not a one-way cost burden. The City of Monona routinely incurs significant unreimbursed expenses on behalf of the City of Madison as a direct result of our own public safety policies.
You have
Monona
about a minute
police officers are equipped with body-worn cameras as a matter of policy. Madison, despite being the second largest police department in the state, has chosen to not implement body-worn cameras. While Monona officers respond to major incidents in Madison, including events such as the Abundant Life shooting, where Monona officers were among the first on the scene and the first inside the building, Monona assumes substantial administrative and legal costs. These include responding to public records requests, reviewing footage, redacting sensitive material, and managing compliance with Wisconsin open records law. Despite this, Monona has never sought to bill Madison for these costs or suggested that Madison's policy choices should trigger financial liability during mutual aid responses. The empirical record also demonstrates that Monona exercises restraint in pursuit policies. In 2024, 51 total pursuits, 41% voluntarily terminated, 11 involving outside agency assists. 2025 preliminary shows 38 total pursuits, over 30% terminated, 8 involving outside agency.
That's your time. If you could wrap up, please.
Even though I had some technical issues in the beginning there, another 30 seconds.
I gave you a little extra time already.
All right, I'll wrap up. Anyway, long story short, I feel that as the chair of the Public Safety Committee in Monona, that the council or your Public Safety Committee could reach out to us and we could talk about it. But instead, we're doing this. So anyway, I'm registering opposition to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the registrants on item 73? Seeing, Alder Evers, question?
Not a question, but if there's 30 seconds that Alder DePula could finish up real quick what your prepared remarks were, please go ahead.
The Alder moves another 30 seconds. Is there a second? A second. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, another 30 seconds for Alder DePula. If you're still with us.
I am.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's important to note that Monona employs a deliberately conservative reporting standard. Any initiated pursuit, even one lasting a half block before termination, is counted as a pursuit, and not all agencies use this as methodology. As a result, Monona's reported numbers reflect transparency and caution, not aggressiveness, and should not be characterized or used to justify punitive measures. For that reason, I am particularly concerned that Resolution 90986 risks creating a hostile or adversarial dynamic between neighboring municipalities at a time when our leadership teams are engaged in good faith cooperation. And I'm talking about meetings between our chiefs. Mutual aid depends on trust. Policies that frame cooperation through a lens of punishment or financial retribution threaten to undermine that trust and weaken regional public safety outcomes. For these reasons, I urge the Common Council to reconsider Resolution 90986 as written, correct the factual record regarding the cited national standards that don't actually exist, and allow ongoing interagency collaboration to continue without the pressure of a resolution that risks doing more harm than good. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for the registrants on this item? Seeing none, then that, I believe, does bring us to the end of public comment. My apologies for skipping forward earlier. And does bring us to item 13, which is Legistar 90908, amending sections within Chapter 28 of the Madison General Ordinances to allow reduced rear setback if adjacent to publicly owned multi-use path. On item 13, let's start with a motion, please. President Vitiver.
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Are there questions for staff on item 13? Seeing Alder Field.
Thank you, Mayor. If we have Director Tuttle here, could she give us an overview of what this item does?
Director Tuttle?
Sure, thank you, Alder. So this code change does a couple of things to our zoning code as far as setbacks are concerned. Couple of things I'll just mention technically that were not subject of the public comment that you heard tonight. First of all, this clarifies our existing side yard setback provision. We have some requirements in the ordinance about side yard setbacks to clarify that those are for street side yard setbacks. This removes some confusing language that the staff has had to work through in administering the ordinance. It also removes a duplicative setback requirement that was intended to help align with the building code requirement, but instead has added some unnecessary complications. So this ordinance does both of those things. And then the thing that you heard about tonight in public comment is that it changes the required rear yard setback for mixed-use, commercial, employment, and downtown zoning districts to allow for a 5-foot rear setback when a property is adjacent to a public multi-use path. The purpose of this is to better align the regulatory setback requirements for properties adjacent to public paths due to the varying conditions of properties adjacent to the path. And happy to answer other questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any additional questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, item 13 has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, item 13 has been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 13. And that will take us to item 17. Item 17 is Legistar 91135, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to establish a temporary moratorium on the consideration and/or issuance of zoning certificates for data centers and telecommunication centers, and amending sections of the Madison General Ordinances to accommodate a temporary moratorium. On item 17, President Vitover, a motion, please.
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 17. Are there questions for staff? Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. I joined the Plan Commission meeting a little bit late yesterday, but there was a lot of useful information there. I wonder if you can, either one of you or both of you, can provide a summary of the discussion on what is this resolution is trying to accomplish. The construction sizes that we are trying to target and the reason for the 12 months. Those kind of were my questions, but if you want to elaborate into a larger summary, that's also great. Thank you.
Happy to start, Alder, and Matt Tucker is also here who can add anything as well that I might gloss over. So the first thing I'll note is that this is a zoning code change, and it's a zoning code change that has an expiration date. So the expiration date will be 12 months from the effective date of the ordinance, presuming it is adopted. It is the intent of the staff to work through a process that employs research, engages with stakeholders and public feedback to develop a responsible regulation for zoning to administer data centers and telecommunication centers in the long term. And that replacement ordinance would be brought forward to the boards and commissions that would be in review of that ordinance before the expiration date of the moratorium that we are talking about tonight. This establishes a moratorium on the consideration of zoning approvals for that period of up to 1 year for data centers and telecommunication centers that are over 10,000 square feet in floor area. That was one of the things that we talked about last night at the Plan Commission, and particularly for data centers that are the principal and primary use of a property or a tenant space within a property. This ordinance would establish a data center definition that we'll use during the moratorium and also reiterates the definition of telecommunication centers that are in our ordinance today, and which is the use that some of the data centers that we know exist in the city were permitted as in the past. The reason for 12 months for this is to help us use this moratorium as a planning tool so that the city can develop and adopt those long-term regulations. As you heard tonight, and I think as we'll hear throughout the duration of this moratorium, there are many different factors to consider, including land use questions related to energy, water, other utility services, as well as other potential goals. Those could be about things that we would like this use to help promote in the city, or goals around things that we would like to help ensure are not negatively impacted or unnecessarily burdened in the city. So the purpose of this 12 months is for us to outline a process for us to consider all of those issues, ensure that we've done the appropriate amount of research and talk to folks who have deep knowledge and or authority over certain related issues, and make sure that we're bringing you a well-established policy. We also anticipate that while the moratorium tonight directly relates to a zoning code ordinance, that there may be issues that come up in the course of this process that are not zoning code related. And so it's possible that you all as policymakers may wish to adopt related ordinances that may be within the city's purviews and authorities that are not in the zoning code. And so we would need time to identify what those issues are, ensure that the city has the regulatory authority to address those issues at the local level, and develop those policies as well. We would anticipate that this policy ultimately will probably have extra referrals. Typically, zoning code ordinances are referred to the Plan Commission before they come back to the council for adoption. As you heard tonight, you may wish to refer that ultimate policy to other committees like the Economic Development Committee or Sustainability Committee. And so we expect that the actual legislative process to consider the adoption of any proposed ordinances may take much longer than a zoning code ordinance might, up to a couple of months potentially, for all those referrals to work their way back through to the council. So those are maybe more details than what you were asking for, Alder, about why we think that 12 months is the right duration for this moratorium.
Thank you. I got myself off the queue. One more question. So when you, thank you for all all those details. So earlier when you mentioned that we will engage stakeholders, will you be engaging, for example, the Community Development Committee, like bring the item to them as a discussion item perhaps, to collect input in some of the issues that were addressed by some of the speakers today?
Yes, we can certainly talk through any other boards and commissions that should be on the list of committees that we talk to as we develop the policies. I think some of this will also be defined by really getting clear on what questions we want to ask and what issues we need feedback on as well.
And then when it comes to people outside the city, the city government, like who are you expecting to get input from? Who are your stakeholders? Do you have those defined already?
Great question. We are working on defining those right now, but certainly I would anticipate that folks like utility companies, stakeholders engaged in environmental and other sustainability measures that have knowledge of the issues surrounding these types of uses, economic development folks, as well as one of the things that we did talk about with the Plan Commission last night is that there are also efforts underway to establish a committee at the county level around data centers. And you may have seen in the news in the last 24 hours, we know that this is an item that the legislature and folks at the state level are interested in talking about. So we'll want to make sure that we're closely coordinated with those regional and state level stakeholders as well.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Uguer, questions?
Thank you, Mayor. This would also be a question for Director Tuttle. If there were no moratorium, could you describe the process that would happen today if a party wishing to establish a data center of greater than 10,000 feet, what would happen today if they made application under the current zoning law?
This is a great question, Alder. Let me just pull up really briefly a section of the memo to make sure I walk through this correctly. So currently, we have administered the permitting of data centers. We have few of them in the city today that meet the definition, the over 10,000 square feet definition. But currently, they are administered as telecommunication centers. So we would look into our zoning code at where telecommunication centers are allowed within the city. There are two different ways that uses can be allowed within Madison. The first is through what we call a permitted use process. So this essentially means that as long as a proposal meets the standards in our zoning code, it can be reviewed and approved administratively by the staff, generally without hearings. Many of the zoning districts in Madison where telecommunication centers are currently an allowable use, they are treated as a permitted use, and so they could go through that staff level approval process. We only have a couple zoning districts in the city where telecommunication centers are conditional uses, which is the process that we use to refer development projects through the Plan Commission and review them against our standards for development to ensure that major impacts to the city's systems and infrastructure can be considered before a project is approved. So I think, in short, Alder, it's likely that a project would be able to be reviewed administratively as a telecommunication center.
And then just to elaborate a little bit, in a current zone where following the current telecommunications category could be dealt with administratively, what would staff have the authority to require or consider? Would that be very clear, or it would be fairly uncertain?
We could still administer all of the city's ordinances in terms of requirements for development, requirements for how building code is applied, requirements for how driveways, all the different site elements are reviewed and approved. The main thing I think that would not be applicable here that I think folks have, when we talk about the range of data centers that could be proposed. The main thing that we would not have in an administrative process like that is to consider any conditions that we may need as part of an approval of a project. So that would be things like ensuring that certain access is provided, making sure that the city is able to serve a project based on its size, scope, or the anticipated impacts of it. And sometimes that means requiring certain mitigations by a developer that we wouldn't have as direct ability to control in a permitted or an administrative process.
Thank you. And then in some other districts where it would be a conditional use, I suppose it's possible that in comparison with what we might come up with during this moratorium, a developer of a data center might actually see more certainty than under the current situation, because hopefully we will have defined what would be necessary to meet the zoning requirements. Or is that wishful thinking on my part?
It's certainly why we need 12 months, Alder. But no, I think that is our intent. We want to make sure that the ordinance that ultimately is adopted is clear about what a data center is well informed about what a data center is, and has clear standards for how they can be permitted in the city in the future.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Alder. President Bidiver, questions?
Thank you. I'm just struggling with visualization. What does 10,000 square feet look like? Whether it's a single story or 2 or 3 or 4 stories, like, can you give us just sort of some buildings that are that size for us to just kind of think about comparatively? I was just asking Matt Tucker if he could help me come up with a building you might recognize off the top of your head, but he mentioned probably about the size or smaller than a typical Walgreens. It's a fairly low threshold.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Mayor, questions?
Thank you. Yes, also for Director Tuttle. Having attended last night's Plan Commission meeting and heard other discussions, I know that you haven't kept records of data centers built since that isn't a class that you've been tracking. But do you have any anecdotal knowledge of, in the last handful of years, of any being built in that size?
Yes, there's one on Broadway. It was a former hotel in the southeast part of the city. It was converted. The rooms were converted to data center rooms in 2013, 2014. That's the only one that we're aware of recent.
Is that the one that's owned by the county?
No, it's owned by a private company.
It's called the Dane County Data Exchange, though. Okay. Yeah.
And are you aware of any proposals or anything in the works in the next year?
We have been hearing just questions about this use within our broader region, but we do not have any active proposals.
And then lastly, what's the current for telecommunications center? What is the current zoning type that those are allowed by right in?
Correct. That's what our current zoning considers. We don't have a current use or definition for data centers. So those are generally by right in the districts they're allowed, except for in 2 districts that are conditional use.
But what types are those?
I got it.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
The districts where they're permitted uses by right is your question,
Yes.
correct? Alder?
Yes, sorry.
The Suburban Employment Center, the Employment Campus District, Industrial Limited, and Industrial General.
As well as Commercial Corridor Transitional and Commercial Center.
Yeah.
Those are all the districts where they're permitted.
Okay, and I know we have a year to work on this, but do you think those would be similar for where data centers might go?
I think so. Ultimately, these are the districts where uses that are probably similar in nature are generally permitted within the city, but we'll evaluate whether there are any other locations, particularly if we have definitions that divide data centers based on the level of intensity of their use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole, another set of questions?
Yes, thank you. So to follow up on Alder Uguera's line of question, so an administrative approval and a conditional approval, neither one of those come to council.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to also kind of finish that thought that they stay one in Plan Commission and one in the, in your office. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. President Vitiver, additional questions?
Yes, apologies. I just thought of another question. Just wondering about, and I don't know who can answer this question. Maybe it's for Alder Verveer. But if we have other examples from the past of when we've sort of had this, modernization where our zoning code hasn't kept up and we've needed to kind of take a pause. Do we have other examples from the past of sort of developments like this? I don't know who that's going to. Other data center developments? No, just sort of in general, like if it, I don't know, like
We've had to add new uses to the zoning code.
yeah, it's something that's come up in current practice that we are like, oh, we don't respond to that well, and sort of we had to take a step back and say, how do we deal with this?
Director Tucker?
Yeah, I think a lot of the policy work we do, we that's brought forth to us by alders, goes through that practice. I'm not familiar of a time that we had a moratorium pause like this, but we spent plenty of time filling the gaps. A real big one that we did was when we rewrote the city's zoning code between 2007 and adoption in 2013, where we kind of basically retooled and created all kinds of new things that we may not have ever had thought of, like mixed-use buildings and things of that nature as their current form appears. They may or may not have been allowed at the time, but they were very clearly allowed or not allowed after we adopted that ordinance through that process.
So that process took a 4-year period.
5 zoning
5
code
years.
rewrite, but that was a
But you were doing
comprehensive
overall.
rewrite of the entire zoning code
Right.
for the city of Madison. It's a huge project, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Pritchett, questions?
Quickie question. If it could be perfect, where would the ideal data center be located? Not thinking about the moratorium. If you held the moratorium, on or off, where would it be? Especially when you talk about impact, environmental impact, you think about size and things like that. So where would it be?
I think that's what we'll ultimately work through in the process to develop the regulations. The question was where would the ideal data center be? I do think that it will depend. You mentioned a couple of factors related to things like size or the actual, the physical composition of a data center. We know that there are examples out there of very small data centers that can operate essentially as a closet within an office building, or a room within a larger laboratory building. We also know kind of the opposite end of the spectrum are data centers that are often in the news right now, which may include many buildings. They may be a campus-style data center, and could even include their own utility infrastructure. So it ultimately will depend on how we define data centers and what standards we set for them in the future, what the right locations are for them based on those factors.
So when you say data center, okay, could you enlighten me and tell me, what types of data centers are you referring to? I mean, give me, like 1 or 2 examples of a data center, okay, that would operate, and let's assume that the zoning, characteristics are in place.
Yep. So I'll describe the way that we're describing data centers for the purposes of this moratorium, which is a starting point for the work that will follow. So we're defining this as a facility whose primary purpose is to actually store, manage, process, and warehouse data. It may include computer or network equipment, other appliances that help with the storage and processing and transformation of that data. We also specifically, as the Alder asked earlier, are talking about data centers that are over 10,000 square feet. So we're talking about buildings that approximately the size of a Walgreens or larger. And so this could be either single buildings or multiple buildings that together make up a data center. What we're not talking about, maybe on the opposite side, to just answer your question, are those types of data centers that are within or supporting an existing business. We're not talking about prohibiting the type of data center that is the data processing capacity to power a lab and is fully within a lab space and just supporting that laboratory. We're not talking about prohibiting data centers that are in office buildings that are smaller than 10,000 square feet. So ultimately, we'll be working to define in the long term what a data center means to us and what the standards are for the different ways that data centers show up. Because they can range widely today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Oakwitz, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think this is for Director Tuttle, but it might be for Matt. This gets back to a comment that one of the public speakers brought up about energy distribution costs and the increase in those fixed energy distribution costs as a result of new data centers. And I just wanted to ask, do you know, or will part of this investigation look into whether the city can charge impact fees for electrical distribution, or are we going to rely on the utility? Will we need the utility to do that?
We will talk to the utilities about that, as well as do a legal review of what our authorities are related to electrical utilization. Ultimately, that's not a City of Madison utility. And so I think impact fees are generally a legal tool that we have the ability to assess on infrastructure that the city is responsible for providing as a result of development. But it's something, our authorities related to energy utilization and costs related to that is something we will explore through this process.
Okay, thank you.
I have no other alders in the queue with questions. So thank you, Director Tuttle and Director Tucker. Item 17 has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Alder Evers.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to express my appreciation for your leadership in this regard. And I also want to comment on the distinction that is made in the memo and in the resolution itself, that this is not a permanent moratorium, and it's not a moratorium meant to be obstructive, but a moratorium meant to be instructive, to allow staff to educate themselves and position themselves in a way to give us solid advice when the time comes. It's not necessary, or it's not helpful if we're presented with a challenge in a rapidly changing industry and a rapidly changing environmental and economic climate if we don't have the facts to be able to make a good decision. So with all due respect to the Chamber of Commerce, this is not an attempt to shut out this industry, but it's to make sure that we have the necessary knowledge to be able to give sound advice. So I encourage my colleagues to vote in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Govindarajan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think a temporary moratorium is a really good idea, especially because it's a very fluid dynamic right now, since all of this is really new. The only thing I want to encourage staff to keep in mind is I would really appreciate, as part of the stakeholder engagement, to include the university as part of this. About a month or a month and a half ago, they recently announced their College of Innovation and AI or whatever. It has a really complex name I can't remember, but I'm sure they are the economy for the city of Madison. So I really want to make sure that they're involved in these discussions. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Uguer.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me first say that I suspect that everybody in this room right now could have, during disclosures, mentioned that they are dependent on data centers. I see right now some of you are probably checking your phones and so forth, and I can guarantee you that when you made a connection these days with current iPhone or other phone technology, you are probably using the services of a data center. Some of us do more. I am not involved in any data centers as such, but I'm an officer of an artificial intelligence company, and I regularly use the new capabilities of AI in some of my consulting business to prepare advanced papers and shortcut all kinds of things. I'd go beyond that, so I perhaps should have disclosed that fact because I do see this as a situation parallel to the comments that Alder Evers made, that this is not a moratorium disguised as a prohibition of data centers. We're going to have data centers. They're going to be other places in Wisconsin and so forth. We see what's already happening in terms of public reaction and where there's uncertainty as to how to deal with them and so forth. I would agree completely with the comments of the Chamber of Commerce that this city and its growth and all of the things that we're contending with, the good things that come from that growth, are in part because we have a base of technological companies that, if they don't currently use AI to a large extent, they will be in the future. And even manufacturing companies and agricultural companies that don't make much use of it now will in the future, because that's the direction we're going, and they'll have to be supported by data centers. I believe, after thoroughly considering this, because it took some time before I agreed to be a co-sponsor on this resolution, that this is essential. This is going to allow the city of Madison to determine which ones can be located here to support the growth of this economy and the growth of employment and the growth of opportunity in Madison, with the certainty that comes from working through these questions that we right to have. Whether it's how we connect to the power grid, whether it's about closed-loop or open-loop systems for water cooling of these things and all of the other things, including air quality and so forth, that are involved. My expectation, my hope, and the reason I'll be supporting this amendment is that I expect that a year from now, that a business that's currently here, or one coming in, or a data center that's interested in some kind of footprint within the city of Madison will come and say, okay, it's very clear, this is what we have to do, and the citizens of Madison can be sure that if it meets that requirements, they will be reasonably protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue wishing to speak. Alder Pritchett.
Have we given any thought to, I know and I believe that delay sometimes is preferable to error. But have we thought about the consequences, knowing that technology is moving very, very fast? And if we decide to delay, with the moratorium, what are some of the things that we potentially will lose out on as a result of not addressing this now? I'm reminded when computers first came out, and I kicked myself constantly for not buying some stock. Okay. I'm still reminded of that. And so, as I said, knowing how rapidly technology moves, what's the downside? Especially if we know that, location is important. If we know that size, if we know that we don't have the right space to do this and things like that, what do we lose? And will we kick ourselves for holding back for 12 months, 6 months, 2 years, however long? That's the concern I have. I say that because I'm old, okay? And I say, things move very, very rapidly, and you don't want to be caught, gee whiz, we should have done this, we should have done that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to respond to Alder Pritchard's comments, I think that's a very good question. It's something that I thought about a lot in this, but a year is a very short time, I think, in the scale of the way these facilities are planned. This also, doesn't have anything to do, certainly with the hyperscale structure that's planned for DeForest. That's not something that would happen here, that the land cost would just be enormous. We're looking at these more smaller ones, and just as an example of a couple that I know of in my building, I work at 222 West Wash, and there's one that's smaller than 10,000 square feet. It's a little one. This also wouldn't affect ones where it's not the primary usage, so it's possible that some, and this is something we'll talk with the UW about, but some things with their focus, they have the education as a primary use, and it may not impact them wanting to build out. So I think that given that it's only a year, we actually will be giving tools to people who might want to build some of these on a periphery where it's allowed, where it's a good use, to know exactly what they can do, since zoning is often a good message to developers, what is permissible, what will be approved. So I think this gives us a chance to maybe encourage that being built in the right way. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue wishing to speak. So item 17 has been moved and seconded. Is there objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 17? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 17. That will take us to item 64. Item 64 is Legistar 91026, authorizing the Madison Police Department to accept grants for training on an ongoing basis. On item 64, President Vitover, a motion, please.
I'm going to move to re-refer to finance on 216.
The motion is to re-refer to finance on February 16th. Is there a second? Moved and seconded to re-refer. And on item 64, then, are there questions for staff? Oh, I'm sorry. President Vitter, we just need a date for it to come back to council then as well.
What's the
Reason, please.
yeah? What's the following? I'm sorry, I didn't pull up the following council date.
Stand informal, so we're looking at February 16th.
February 24th.
And then
So,
February
back
24th.
to council on February 24th.
And
And the reason, yes.
the reason.
So it's to allow staff to identify more criteria around when such items should be exempted and when they should be allowed, and to make it more ecumenical across the departments.
Thank you. So the motion, which has been seconded, is to re-refer this item to Finance Committee on the 16th and to the council on the 24th. Are there questions for staff then on item 64? Seeing none, is there any discussion on the motion to re-refer? Alder Figueroa Cole?
Just mark me as a no, please. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, then on the motion to re-refer, with the exception of Alder Figueroa Cole, is there objection to recording aye votes? Seeing no objection, we'll record one no and the balance aye. And that will take us to item 73, which is Legistar 90986, assessing cost associated with mutual aid responses provided by Madison Police Department for the purposes of recouping extraordinary expenses. On item 73, motion, please, President Vitover.
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 73. Are there questions for staff on item 73? Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like Chief Patterson to provide an update of where we are with any updates that we have on this particular regard, specifically the discussion we had today. I have an amendment to add a line to the resolution, but I'd like for Patterson to bring us up to speed. Thank you.
Chief?
Oh, thank you for the question, Alder, and thank you all for your time tonight. So there have been some organic discussions that have started to occur within the Dane County Chiefs Group. Just today, I met with Chief Cheney from Monona Police Department. I had a very good conversation. As you all know, I've known Brian for over 2 decades, so it comes fairly easily for us to connect and have these types of, tricky conversations and challenging discussions and disagreements. But we are committed to forming a subgroup within the Dane County Chiefs Association to come together and examine this topic of pursuits in particular, and hopefully find some common ground and some agreements around the differences in pursuit policies that we see around the county. I think it's certainly time, certainly in the wake of, the injuries to Officer Ryan Kimberly a few months ago. And so I'm eager to have that. And, what I talked with him about is trying within the first quarter to make, the initial connections. And then hopefully I'd be able to come back to you with my second quarter report and give you an update on where things are at. And hopefully there's been some progress and some agreements made in this particular topic. But I'm very optimistic, and I think, given the discussions that I think this resolution has created and forced in some aspects, we're on the right path to make some positive improvements overall.
Thank you, Chief. Alder?
Thank you. And I also want to take the opportunity to clarify, I don't know, maybe Attorney Haas or the chief can answer the question, to clarify some of the public comment on regards to collecting, framing the invoicing of funds as a punitive thing on this resolution. Can we please revisit or explain to the council what does this statute allow us to do today without this resolution? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Alder. The Wisconsin statute specifically authorize law enforcement agencies to seek reimbursement and to be reimbursed by municipalities in response to mutual aid requests. When there are costs incurred by the city, by MPD in this case, MPD can already seek reimbursement for costs that we have incurred due to responding to a mutual aid request.
Thank you. Does the statute indicate the amount, any thresholds on how much money is a significant, or is there a threshold of the money that we can collect for these kind of expenses?
No, there isn't.
And does the statute says that you can collect expenses for everything, or is it limited to, for example, mutual aid?
I'm sorry, Alder, I haven't looked at the statute in a bit. I'm not sure.
I think I have it memorized, but I just want to make sure that it's clear. Any one of you can answer, please.
It's seldom used to provide some additional context, but typically it's been used to reimburse personnel costs and travel costs. And really, within Dane County, there's, as has been recited repeatedly through emails and through public comments, that there's a culture of not doing that between agencies. But I think at the end of the day, there's profound differences between assist outside agency calls, which, if we want to compare numbers, we do several hundred a month probably around the county, as do all other agencies. And then there's mutual aid requests for, calls for emergency assistance or larger things. Not all of them incur exceptional costs, which is what I think this resolution ultimately was trying to draw out. And certainly, invoking the Abundant Life tragedy is a poor example, in my opinion, because those costs were shared throughout the county, and frankly, this type of resolution would never deter any officer in Dane County from responding to that kind of call. So I had to call that out. I took personal offense to it. So thank you.
But again, the statute doesn't limit us on the dollar amount. So this resolution actually says for extraordinary circumstances.
Extraordinary costs, and I think maybe purposely on your part, it didn't provide guardrails so that there could be, healthy discussions and examination of what the total costs were, which I think is the right place to be, especially when we're coming from, like I said, a tradition of not having guardrails and not having black and white parameters and procedures to follow when it comes to building. I think it's better to start at this place personally.
Thank you. And then, so moving on from the financial discussion, which again, we are totally, every department, every agency in the state of Wisconsin is entitled to act on, not just us, or this resolution doesn't really give that power. The state is giving us that power. So moving on from the financial side of these things, when it comes to the second part of this resolution, which was for me to create awareness on the pursuit practices from some of our neighbors. So one of the goal was to have the discussions, which I'm so very happy and glad that happened today. So I want to ask you from your perspective, from your perspective as a chief and in charge of our department, what is your do you have an opinion on this resolution on regards to the part of the pursuits awareness type of thing?
Well, I think, Alder, if the intention was to generate healthy debate and dialogue, it certainly achieved that in the last month. And, I think it really, in law enforcement circles, but also between communities, I think it's important for our community members to understand that there's, discretionary policies, which I would argue Monona has, where a lot of discretion falls in the lap of the individual officer to make the decision whether or not to pursue. And then there's restrictive policies, which is what Madison has, where in the absence of a violent felony, we're not pursuing. I think it's important for residents as they travel through these lines that are not visible, called jurisdictional boundaries throughout Dane County, where you can literally pass from Madison to Fitchburg to McFarland to, to Verona without, any wherewithal. But now you see a vehicle pursuit occurring and you see a crash. I think it's important for them for community members to understand that there, in some instances, are pretty profound differences between police practices. And I think we've achieved that, if that's your question.
So, and then last question for now, very bluntly, do you oppose this resolution?
If I was in opposition of this resolution, I would have come to you. I do think it allows certainly interpretation. It allows still collaboration, and it allows us to still take a step back and have a good overview of what the actual incident was, what occurred, and whether or not billing is appropriate, which largely we're doing currently, but it has happened very seldom.
Thank you.
And although the city attorney can answer your question about the statute now.
I'm
sorry.
Located the statute, Alder, so to better answer your question about what types of costs can be reimbursed, the statute says all wage payments, disability payments, pension and workers' compensation claims, damage to equipment and clothing, and medical expenses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Uguer, questions?
Thank you, Mayor. This would be for Attorney Haas. Would I be correct in assuming that there is no current Madison ordinance which prohibits the use of the state statute?
Correct.
We could do it now.
Right.
So would I be correct in reading the end of this resolution that it merely establishes a procedure for how we would determine if we were going to make a charge and how much that would be? So it's procedural. It doesn't change a policy as such, other than to define what procedure we would use if we were to take advantage of the state statute. Is that correct?
I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Ritter, questions?
Yes, this is for Chief Patterson. Chief Patterson, my understanding is that only Monona and Maple Grove have these pursuit policies. I'm sorry, Maple Bluff, thank you. Wrong community. Maple Bluff have these pursuit policies in Dane County. Is that correct?
When you say these pursuit policies,
Sorry.
I assume you're referring to discretionary policies.
Yeah, so that allow them to pursue sort of under, so,
They provide less restrictive guidance, I suppose, is the best way to put it. It allows for an officer to be granted their own discretion to determine whether or not they should initiate the pursuit. Ours, like I said, it is very firm, saying violent felony must be present, otherwise you don't pursue.
and why is that?
Well, it's a risk mitigation decision, frankly. I mean, I've said this publicly in the news. I mean, pursuits are inherently risky. They present risk to uninvolved members of the public, to the officers involved, and certainly to the individuals pursuing. And I think if you look even recent examples, there's a lot of young, inexperienced drivers that are making these decisions to flee. In our opinion, for property loss or property damage reasons, it's not worth putting that risk in the laps of our community and frankly, leaving it up to the individual officer to make that decision. So we rely on a restrictive policy, which, every government document, I would argue, that the COPS office puts out has a disclaimer saying these are not the opinions of the DOJ. But at the end of the day, they paid for this study, which produced 65 recommendations, which is titled A Guide for Pursuit Management. So if I may have suggested that they were best practices, I apologize, but I think a guide giving, 65 recommendations to all law enforcement agencies that was, created by PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum. They've been in existence for about 50 years. An independent, nonpartisan research entity that brought together law enforcement agencies from around the country. They also brought Lexipol to the table, which is who Monona has used to help with their policy writing, just interestingly enough. But they came together and helped produce that guide of 65 recommendations. So we like to hang our hat on that and say that we're consistent with what is being produced as a guide of what I would argue are best practices.
And can you tell us, so the officer who was injured as a result of the permissive policies of Monona Police Department, can you tell us what did that cost the city in finances, and what did that cost the officer in injuries and recovery and the family?
Well, I don't have an exact figure because obviously the tally is still going. Ryan has not been able to return to work. He's made amazing progress, but he still has a road to go, and how long that is, I don't know. And I don't think he knows, but he's made amazing progress. But the loss has been profound. If you set aside the squad car, there was a complete loss, and all the equipment inside, I mean, that's X number of dollars. I don't know exactly what that figure is, but the loss in medical costs and lost time is, I'm sure I don't have an exact figure, but I'm sure we're approaching $500,000 at this point. It's been significant. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Alder Evers. Questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Chief Patterson, I'm relieved. Is the microphone on? Yes, it is. Okay, thank you. I'm relieved to hear that you are in favor of this resolution, but it sounds like you don't see this necessarily as a green light for the city to begin recouping these expenses, more as an opportunity to have these important discussions.
no, I would probably argue to the contrary, Alder, to be honest. I think it's, to previous points that speakers made, I think it's, in the context of being a good neighbor, I think is very important, especially in public safety. We have to be able to rely on one another and assist one another whenever needed. And I think if I felt this resolution was going to strongly damage those relationships, obviously I would say so. But I think it still allows us to have healthy discussions and dialogue and, confer with one another. But we have to be able to take a step back, I think, when there's significant loss incurred because of, each other's decisions. And, I was hopeful when this was introduced that we would start having these discussions again, and that goal has been met. So in that regard, that's mostly why I'm voicing my support, is because I think we're heading in a good direction. So,
Well, let me see if I understand you correctly. You're not suggesting to the council that we should immediately begin charging for costs and recouping costs, but rather there is an appropriate level of discussion that perhaps will have yield positive benefit among the various agencies within Dane County.
I hope so. But as previous speaker, I don't recall which, cited, Monona has publicly said, well, we've helped, 185 times or 200 times. And I think the last thing we want to do is start going back and forth with communities, because we all have those numbers. We can all say we've helped each other X number of times per month or per year. And I think that would probably burn more calories and time and money on everyone's side than we'd ever recoup. So I don't think that would be a healthy place to be, Alder.
Not to be redundant, so you don't see this as a mandate for us to immediately go after and recoup costs, is that correct?
No, I don't.
And lastly, are you concerned that if we pass this resolution, that what Alder DePula, the City Council, Monona City Council Alder, testified, implying that there could be a quid pro quo, a tit for tat, that they would begin to bill us for the costs associated with Discovery, since they have body-worn cameras and we don't? Does this create that possibility, this lack of mutuality and trust among agencies, or do you think that we can overcome that through the kind of discussions that you had with Chief Cheney today?
Well, I'm hopeful it would never come to that, frankly, and I'm hopeful we can continue to dialogue. And I've got a great deal of respect for Chief Cheney. I think we agree on a lot of things, maybe not pursuit things, but we agree on a lot of things. And but I think we're both committed to try to find some common ground between our agencies, but also all the other agencies we're hoping to bring to the table and have those conversations. But there's a lot of records that we all rely on other than just body-worn cameras, and there's a lot of written records, and both Monona and Madison are on different RMSs, and I would hope we wouldn't come to, some sort of back and forth where we're, nickel and diming each other, I guess, so to speak, for certain types of records, because, we're obviously in a position of power that I don't want to necessarily exert. I mean, we have a lot of records on hand, and I just hope we don't go there, because that would not be productive.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Glenn, questions?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Chief Patterson, or yes, I guess I'd start with Chief Patterson. Extraordinary expenses, would that be something like the incident that happened on the Beltline? Do you have a definition in your head of what that looks like?
Well, I mean, I think I've been largely thinking of the incident that we've talked about involving our officer. I have never once thought, until it was brought up by others, about incidents like the Abundant Life Christian School or anything like that, because while those are mutual aid, those are not, resulting in terrible losses, but not, I think, the extraordinary losses that this resolution is referring to, if that makes sense. But certainly, I think there could be other examples, but these are rare examples, Alder. They don't, fortunately, occur that often.
Okay. And my other question, I'm not sure
Alder, you're breaking up a little bit, Alder.
Oh, let me shut my video off. See if that helps. I'm also pregnant, so. I don't know who this would go to, Mayor, about like the process to manage these kind of billings when they would come up. Who would that be? Who and how would that happen?
I don't know if the finance director or the police
That's
chief.
what I was thinking, but I just don't want to get it wrong.
Alder Glenn, that would probably be managed through the risk manager working with the Madison Police Department staff as well as City Attorney's Office.
Okay, thank you. I'm complete, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole, additional questions?
Yes, one follow-up with Alder Vidaver's questioning. So when our policy has a one kickoff to start pursuits, does that mean that once someone is breaking the law and we don't pursue them, does that mean that there's no accountability, or do you have other methods to trace the people that are causing trouble in our streets?
Can you rephrase that?
It's like, do you track the license plate? Do you use cameras to figure out when you don't pursue? Yes. Do you leave it at that, or do you have other methods to?
No, and that's actually something that Chief Cheney and I talked about, is perhaps an area that we could offer, collaboration and assistance to Monona in the future, but and vice versa, frankly. But we encourage our staff to use investigative tactics instead of relying on pursuits to get the immediate apprehension. But when the risk is outweighing the reward, so to speak, we encourage them to use things like traffic cameras, and if they have license plate information, or if they've obtained the vehicle owner information, and trying to follow up through past contacts that we may have on file or past reports to determine who was driving, to attempt to get to some level of accountability. But we'd rather employ those types of tactics than relying too heavily on pursuits.
So thank you. So less pursuit doesn't mean less accountability.
That's right. No, and often we are able to, determine who is driving and make the apprehension after, a pursuit has been decided against or terminated.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Pritchett, questions?
Just a quickie question. Are there benefits to perhaps having combined, updated, continuing education programs for both Madison and Monona, or Madison Fitchburg, or Madison Verona, and providing those officers that would be involved in chases and things like that, using scenarios to help them work through, the times when you don't, and then rely on other tools that you have in terms of license plate readers and things like that. If you had those, I think that in so many ways would help people to begin to understand, that there are times when we do and there are times when we don't. But you're getting them to react and respond into a scenario that happened, or perhaps something that could perhaps happen. But the goal is to educate and get people to get into the type of mindset that when you are chasing, you got the adrenaline rush and all that stuff is going on, that there's some other things that you're going to have to do with your brain to stop you from doing something that could perhaps have someone have a lifelong challenging recovery. And it's that kind of a thing that I think we have to think about. And if you're not prepped for it, then you're more likely than not to engage in something that could have some dire effects.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe, that education, sometimes it can be, you don't plan for it, but this is what we're going to do today.
No, I think that's a very good point, Alder. Thank you. And, my hope is in the long game when we start these dialogues between police chiefs and hopefully find some commonalities and some agreement that we can talk about, training opportunities between agencies. Because right now, in full disclosure, a lot of the agencies in Dane County train just with themselves, and there's not there's some joint trainings, but not around pursuits. Typically, it's typically in-house, and so I think that's a great thought,
There are
and
great
certainly something we
benefits
could
to doing
explore.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue with questions. Alder Figueroa call additional questions?
No.
Okay.
Just want to move it.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so no additional questions. Item 73 has been moved and seconded. Discussion, Alder Figueroa call.
Yeah, I'd like to add in the amendment that I sent to all alders and the clerks that reads as follow. Be it further resolved that the Madison Chief of Police should continue to engage in more of the recent and encouraging conversations about pursuit policies and possible common ground or agreements with other Dane County police chiefs, to include the police chief in Monona, and should report back to the council with the status of these collaborative conversations and agreements during the chief's second quarterly report to the Common Council of 2026.
Moved and seconded to add that text. On the amendment, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. After having the conversations today with Chief Patterson on regards to the discussions that have taken place, that took place today, we feel strong to ensure that those discussions were acknowledged on the resolution, and that make it a little bit more whole and give us some action for us to get feedback in a few months on what the progress of those discussions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. And is there discussion on the Figueroa Cole amendment? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor to add that language to the underlying resolution? So just on the amendment. Any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll add that language to the underlying resolution. We are back to the main motion of the resolution. Is there further discussion? Alder Martinez Rutherford. Let's see.
Should I use Alder?
It doesn't look like yours is working. So do you want to try Alder O'Brien?
Yeah.
Or the one behind you?
Thank you, Mayor. This is so awkward. I would like to say that I highly appreciate the collaboration I have had and the work with Alder DePula, and want to make sure that they understand that we are committed to working with the alders as well as the mayor in Monona to make our communities safer. We've discussed this policy on several occasions in personal life or personal conversation apart from alder duties. And I want to be clear that we are not being punitive in the sense that we are trying to force Monona into changing a policy that they have. We are just trying to put parameters on how we can protect our community, especially since, and I hope that the chief would concur with this, it seems that Madison disproportionately bears the impact of these types of pursuits, and just make sure that we're bringing light to the fact that it does impact lives, and we are not in the position or not trying to tit for tat so to speak, and being and characterizing different tragedies is not the game we're playing. The game we're playing is to make sure that we're doing all we can to protect our community members and those who serve on for our city, who serve in our police department. And that is all I really have to say. I'm grateful for the Alder's input and grateful for the Common Council here in Madison and their willingness to work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole, discussion?
I want to take the moment to thank staff that helped put this resolution together, and to also, like Chief Patterson was saying, one of the reasons for this was to create awareness and to have the conversation on the table. I have met with multiple others from other municipalities that are reviewing their own policies, and at the end of the day, that's really what I was looking for. I was looking for a region to be more proactive on either if you have a policy, review it. If you don't have a policy, create one, even if you don't have a high level of pursued incidents. So this is, like, I know some people here are new, but like anything else that I do when I put forward, there was a lot of research done on this. It was based on existing data from DOT. It was based on the information and the support from our own departments, our own police departments. So I hope that you all jump on this and support it. So again, thank you to everyone that helped frame the resolution, and thank you for all the other agencies outside the city that are willing to put the work on reviewing their own policies.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue with discussion. So what's before us is the resolution as amended. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Are there any additional introductions of items from the floor or announcements? Alder Govindarajan?
Quick announcement. I just want to say a very happy birthday to our Common Council Chief of Staff, Karen, all the way in the back over there.
I think we will let you get away without us singing to you, at least on camera, but happy birthday to Karen. Are there any other announcements or introductions from the floor? Seeing none, President Vitiver, it's your turn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we stand adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Happy birthday, Karen.